What's up, YouTube? This is Roger here from the Klein Reef, and I'm bringing you episode 4 of my Q&A series. Just go ahead and remind you guys to submit any questions that you guys have on Facebook. That's where I'm most active. That's where I'll post every Monday or Sunday. I'll record the video on Tuesday, and the video goes up on Wednesday. That's my plan. Any questions submitted, pretty much Tuesday evening or later, they don't get answered, so they get moved into the next video. So that's just something to be wary of. But let's jump right into it. I got 2 questions from my YouTube page last week, so I want to address those first. If you guys do have Facebook, just go ahead and send them over there, because I don't always get the notifications on YouTube, and I don't want to forget about you guys. But I made a conscious effort to check this time. First one came from Neil Gooders, and he says, "What is my lighting times and intensities?" Great tank, by the way. So I don't have variable intensity lighting. I only have an all-out T5 fixture by ATI, and it's 6 by 39 watts. And my lighting schedule is, so at 7 o'clock, 1 blue bulb and 1 actinic bulb will come on. And then at 7:30, I'll have 2 blue plus a coral plus and a purple plus come on, and then the other 2 shut off. And then from 8 a.m. to about 7 p.m. I have all 6 bulbs running, 3 blue plus, 1 coral plus, 1 purple plus, 1 actinic running. And then at 7 o'clock I have 2 blue plus, 1 coral plus, and 1 purple plus running. And then at 7:30 to 8 o'clock I run 1 blue plus and 1 actinic. So it's a very, bulbs are turning on and off and going around each other, and it's kind of confusing, but I'll take a screenshot of my lighting schedule and put it up on the screen for you. That way it's a little bit less confusing. But moving on, by John Carr, what lighting system do I use on this size of tank, and what filter do I use? So I just mentioned my lighting a little bit. I use an ATI SunPower 6 by 39 watts. It's a 3-foot fixture. My tank's 36 inches, so it fits perfectly. It's probably a little bit overlit for my tank, to be honest. In terms of what filter do I use, I don't really use a standard filter. I use a full-blown sump refugium, which is covered in a lot of my other videos. You can go ahead and check those out. But it's an ecosystem sump with a Reef Dynamics INS 80 skimmer and some activated carbon and just a doser and stuff like that. Nothing truly a filter. Moving on. Next one came from my Facebook page from last week. He missed the cutoff for last week's video, so he's in this one. By Jeffrey Pretty. He said, "I have a 30-gallon tank that's only 3 months old. He only has a clownfish and a blenny, but he'd like to add some color. I'm not sure what some bright colored fish I can add. The fish store refused to sell me a tank, said the tank was too small. I would also like to add an anemone. What kind would you recommend? The tank has a little algae, but it's okay, I think. Suggestions?" First thing first, I'd get the algae under control, and that's a lot easier than people make it out to be. Just some water changes, some carbon, some GFO, and you'll really get that algae pretty much gone. Or if that's a little still too much, you can just get a really beefy cleanup crew, and they'll do it all for you. But the problem with that is if you're having any algae, any noticeable macroalgae like green hair algae and flake algae and turf algae, there's an underlying problem that you really need to fix first. But in terms of anemones, you could go, anemones are actually really easy to keep as long as you have the right lighting and you have a semi-moderately consistent maintenance schedule. But the big thing comes in with anemones is lighting. They do need a lot of light, and if you give them too much light, they'll just kind of go under a rock. And then they'll kind of reach out and get as much light as they need. But in terms of anemones, you could go, rock flower anemones, you can go mini carpet anemone, or you can go even some of the smaller red bubble tip anemones. They're actually starting to appear in the hobby a lot smaller than they used to. None of my 5 anemones have ever gotten more than 8 inches wide before they split in half. So that's something you could be wary of. But in a 30-gallon tank, an 8-inch anemone is going to be pretty big. In terms of colorful fish, there's actually a really good thread on Nano Reef. It's called Nano Fish, I think is the thread name. It's like fish suggestions, and it listed by tank size fish suggestions. and I suggest going to check some of those out. And you could also go to something like Live Aquaria and type in 30-gallon tank size restriction. They're generally okay. I don't really follow the Live Aquaria rules, hence the tang in my tank, but you can get a really good idea of what kind of colorful fish you want. Just make sure it kind of fits in aggression-wise with a clownfish and a blenny, so it's not getting picked on. Let's see where my next question is, by Dean and Jenny Wood. Said, hello from London, England. I seem to have trouble keeping SPS long-term in my system, so my question is, what advice can you give me to be as successful as you in keeping them? Would you put it down to the Zeovit or a combination of things? I would not put it solely down to the Zeovit system. I know a lot of people that have success with SPS without using Zeovit. So the reason I use Zeovit is because it was kind of a problem solver for me. My tank was very nutrient deprived, and I needed to get some nutrients back in there. And Zeovit products were based around adding nutrients back into a deprived system. So it kind of lined up, and then once I started, I adjust my dosing schedule, and now my tank is doing really well, so I'm not going to change it. But in terms of your overall general SPS question, I've been debating on making an SPS care series. I actually made a video, but it ended up being like 25 minutes long, and I still felt like I left so much out. So I'm going to try and make an SPS care series and see just how much information I can get and compile into some episodes and then organize it and put them up. But in general, you really need good flow, good lighting, good maintenance routine, and you really need proper nutrient export. And that's actually, you can throw feeding in there too. So those 5 things you really need, and you need to lock them in so they're really stable, they're really consistent. Consistency across all of it. So if you want to be consistent with your feedings, you don't want to have some days where there's less food and some days where there's more food. You don't want to have inconsistencies in your nutrient export. You don't want to have some days where it's getting exported really well and some days where it's not. You don't want to do a water change one week and not the next. You want to keep everything as consistent as possible. That way, when something goes wrong, you can kind of figure out where the problem came from. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm like I said, I'm going to try and make a whole series about it on my channel, so keep an eye out for that. I've tried multiple times, but the videos just keep being too long, and I don't want to post another 25-minute long video. So last question comes from my good friend Andrew Sigwanko. He said, what T5 bulb spectrums do you prefer for color and growth? Also, do you supplement your SPS with food? I would also be really interested in an in-depth video on your experiences and results of using the Zeo products. So, for T5 spectrums, a lot of that is kind of personal preference. Once you've kind of follow the basic principles, you want to hit all the fluorescent peaks and all the lighting. But I'm looking for so my current bulb combo is 3 blue plus, 1 purple plus, 1 coral plus, and 1 actinic, and that's based around color. Since I do have a 6x39 watt fixture, I have a lot of light over the tank, so I kind of took some of the par monsters out. Like blue plus bulbs are par monsters. They'll throw a lot of par at the coral, and I don't need that with 6 bulbs, so I put in a purple plus, and then I put in true actinic to kind of lower the par down so I can get the fixture closer to the water and kind of excite some of the more colorful coral pigments instead of exploding growth. But on the other hand, if you wanted a nice growth spectrum, I'd recommend throwing a bunch of par. 4 blue plus, 1 purple plus, and 1 Geisman 65K. I've heard great things about that spectrum. It's probably going to be one of my future combos once if I ever decide to change. I really like the combo I got going now. But next part of your question, an in-depth video on my experiences with Zeovit. I did a little bit of review right before I left to move to Boise. That was probably in July. I did a little mini review. Sadly, being so far away from my tank, I really can't do much in terms of close-ups and stuff like that. But I did expand my Zeovit, so I added one more product. I added their potassium supplement, and I used to use Elos potassium, but now I use the K-Balance potassium by Zeovit. So now I'm using Full's Extra Special, Coral Vitalizer, Sponge Power, B Balance, and K Balance are the 5 that I'm using right now. And I've been debating on starting Coral Snow and Zeobac, but I'm not home, so I really can't do that well. Yeah, so that concludes this week's episode of Roger's Q&A. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you guys do want to submit your own questions for next week, and they don't have to be re-theme related. If you just want me to ramble on about something, we'll gladly do that. But if it wants to be re-theme related, submit a question. And the easiest way to do that is to head over to my Facebook page. I linked it in the beginning of the video, but it's also always linked down in the description down below. Like I said, I'm more active there than I am on YouTube, so please go over there instead. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, you think I missed anything, or you want to add anything to these little questions or answers that I did, be sure to leave them down in the comment section below. Like I said, yeah, I think that's all I got for this week. Thanks, guys, for submitting the questions, and have a nice day, guys. Enjoy your tanks.